This is Reimagining Higher Education, your go-to podcast with remarkable education leaders sharing personal stories from their experience in and around the sector, including reflection and hope for progress in the sector. With your host, Sir Eric Thomas, former Vice-Chancellor at the University of Bristol, President of Universities UK and Chair of the Worldwide University Network, and now Studiosity Advisory Board Member. Welcome.
Well, it's a great pleasure to welcome Professor Evelyn Welch, now Vice-Chancellor of the University of Bristol and previously Deputy Vice-Chancellor at King's College in London. Welcome, Evelyn. I do know something about being the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Bristol, as I'm sure you're finding out. And what I thought we'd talk about today is we'd talk about what it's like being a new VC, you know, and diving into the swimming pool. And then I'd like to explore the role of arts and humanities in both university leadership, but also more generally in the intellectual waterfront of a university, and particularly, for example, with you, where you have a very heavy science university. But if that's okay with you.
That's great, Eric. And yes, indeed, you do know something about being the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Bristol. It's a fantastic institution. When we last spoke, I think you said how much I would enjoy it. And I can say from the very start, I'm really enjoying it.
Well, that's fantastic. Fantastic. Great city as well. Just the most marvelous city. Perhaps, Evelyn, just a tiny picture portrait of your career and yourself.
So I am an academic through and through. I did my undergraduate degree at Harvard and came over to England in the early 1980s, expecting to do maybe 1 or 2 years as a master's program, an MPhil program at the Warburg Institute, which is part of the University of London. I ended up doing my PhD on secular fresco painting at the court of Galeazzo Maria Sforza, Duke of Milan, 1466 to 1476. Rather narrow topic. Got my first job as a temporary lecturer at the University of Essex, got a postdoc, did lots of temporary jobs, and went to Sussex, which was and is a great university, for 10 years, left there as Pro-Vice-Chancellor for Teaching and Learning, went to Queen Mary, University of London, East End of London, left there after 10 years as Pro-Vice-Chancellor for Research and International, and then went to King's College London, where I also spent 10 years, leaving there, having been Deputy Vice-Chancellor and Provost for the Arts and Sciences. And actually my final job was around people and planning and doing lots of stuff around making buildings and people work effectively together. So I'm hoping to have another decade as the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Bristol.
Brilliant. Were you able, I mean, it's always one of the great sorrows for me that because it was molecular biology and the field was changing at the speed of light, I couldn't carry on academic work when I was in a senior leadership role. Everything was, you know, I had to. Were you able to continue to carry on your intellectual inquiry?
Absolutely. And in some ways, carrying on doing teaching, supervising PhD students, and having my own research grants has made it possible for me to really present myself and understand what colleagues are going through. So I'm just completing a book called Renaissance Skin, which is the culmination of a 5-year Wellcome Trust senior fellowship program. And the thing, of course, that I'm most proud of is not just the book itself, which I got a deadline of the end of January to do, but I had 5 postdocs, all of whom now are in their own academic positions or non-academic positions, and creating careers for others is, I think, what we do now. But I have always had large research projects simultaneously with large academic leadership portfolios, and I found that they've complemented rather than got in the way of each other, although it's not straightforward in terms of diving.
But it keeps you right at what academics famously call the front line, doesn't it? There's no way that people can say you've no idea what it's like because you're
exactly. It does make academia sound a bit like a battlefield, and front line, back of house. My better analogy is like an opera house, that you have the diva out in front, but the diva would not actually be able to have an audience without the marketing team, somebody selling the tickets, and above all, the electrician. So the electrician, of course, wouldn't get paid unless people came to the opera because of the name of the diva on the front of the opera. So we all need each other. We all recognize each other's strengths, but we also need to be very appreciative of the fact that there's probably only one diva who is able to deliver those high notes.
Yeah, it is. I think you're quite right about, we should stop the battlefield analogies a bit about, because it doesn't feel. I mean, going on to being a new VC, I remember when you're very experienced, Evelyn. You've had loads. I mean, I went from Dean of Medicine to VC, and I remember describing someone as that my first 3 months felt as if I'd jumped off a cliff.
Yes.
And I wonder if there was still a jumped off a cliff feeling about it, or has all that experience, in a sense, prepared you for what it is?
So there's always a transition, and there's always a huge amount of listening and learning to do. And the biggest danger I think you can make as a new Vice Chancellor is to assume that because you've done one thing in one institution, you can transfer it with ease to another institution. And that's something that I'm very, very aware of. And the big advantage that I've had is, with now 20 years of academic leadership under my belt, is that I'm very used to working across very different disciplines. So the way academic achievement is evaluated and honored in physics is very different from the way it's evaluated and honored in mathematics. And that's even within a single faculty. The way that you work with your PhD students in history is totally different from the way you work with your PhD students in chemistry. And I can't imagine having to learn all of that nuance in 3 months. Because it's a lifetime's work of understanding why somebody is saying we do it this way, and another person from the same institution is saying no, we have to do it that way. Instead of seeing the contradictions, I actually see this as this extraordinarily rich variety, which you need to respect that variety while creating the overall framework that allows us to behave not like sole traders, but as a single institution.
I used to use the analogy of a kind of waterfront. The university is a waterfront, and that the various buildings that make up a waterfront, and those can be the departments or the faculties, and that it makes an intellectual whole, which what's important for the leader is to make that coherent, as you've just pointed out, as an entity.
Yeah. So maybe what you did, Eric, and I think you did a brilliant job, is you put all the restaurants in the front of all of those buildings, and so there's a sort of sense of joyous festival.
Well, one of these things with these podcasts has become clear and clear to me is how much universities are linked to their place, and I it's a different game in London, Evelyn. It's such a huge metropolis. How have you navigated the relationship between the university and the city?
Yeah, and it's been so interesting for me because at the University of Sussex, it was a campus institution, actually trying very hard not to be linked to Brighton and the city, because it wanted to be a global player. at Queen Mary, East End of London, again, some tension between being a real East End institution and being a global institution. And then at King's, you're just a global institution benefiting from that being at the heart, the centre of London, but really hard to work with the city of London because it's so many different cities. Whereas Bristol is just brilliant. It's perfect. Goldilocks, perfect. Not too small, not too big, just right. And it's big enough to be dynamic, globally facing, very diverse, but small enough to get things done. And I've never experienced that before. And that, I think, is what makes the University of Bristol so unique, is its relationship with the city of Bristol. So together, we can actually achieve things that would be just so much harder, either in a smaller town where you would totally dominate, Durham, for example,
Right.
Or a larger city where you're just one of many. And I think that is why the University of Bristol really is successful, is because of that symbiotic positive relationship. So my second day, I was in the mayor's office. And then regularly every 2 weeks, I meet with the mayor, I meet with city councillors, I meet with the Bishop of Bristol. That kind of strong sense of being part of that civic community who are responsible for the success of the city, as well as being responsible for the success of the university. Really, really special.
I mean, a final observation, which is quite interesting about how things have changed, is that if you had gone to Bristol 40 or 50 years ago, you would have been in the West Country. It would have felt like the West Country. Now it feels a bit more linked to the capital. The M4, it draws it into that much more kind of entrepreneurial southeastern culture. Do you feel that?
So my husband's from the southwest. He was born in Glastonbury, and I think he loves the southwest, and he won't hear anything against it. But I do agree that being linked into the kind of dynamism of entrepreneurial cultures, the University of Bristol has more spin-outs than most other institutions. It's sort of third after Oxford and UCL in terms of inward investment into spin-outs. And that's not just because of the kind of links to London. It's also because really brilliant people come to Bristol. It's big enough to find the communities you're looking for, the music you're looking for, the schools for your kids, and good restaurants, great coffee. So there's a sort of buzziness to it that's actually almost West Coast-like in its approach. Now, the University of Bristol is moving a campus and was creating a campus down by the railway station so that you will get off a train an hour and a half from London and you will be in our new campus. And it'll be interesting to see how that accelerates that sense of drive, energy, and entrepreneurialism. But it's certainly not a slow-moving city at all.
No. Oh, I'm terribly jealous of you, Evelyn. I really am. But
it's all built on legacy, Eric. It's all built on legacy.
So what I'd like to explore now with you is in a sense, the role and purpose of arts and humanities in a university. You probably don't know, but I actually did a first-year A-level course in history, English, and Latin before I changed to the sciences to do medicine. I think I saw myself as a sort of historical scholar, and then I realized I wasn't really clever enough. And I often find that, first of all, there's a sort of subtextual, why do we have arts and humanities? Why do we need a degree in history? Why do we need a degree in, the famous medieval historian comment of Charles Clarke all those years ago. And also that there's often sometimes in arts and humanities a slightly paranoid feeling that they're an unloved part of the university, whereas they're the most popular subjects. I've just gone through the cabinet, right? There's only one science degree in the cabinet. The other degrees are arts and humanities or social sciences. And I always argued that if you want abstract intellectual activity in your university, that's where arts and humanities come in big time. And I just wondered how you saw, whether any of that resonated with you, or it's just a scientist's diagnosis.
So I think I'm a historian, art historian, humanist through and through, and we need to be confident in what our disciplines and our interdisciplinarity bring to the future. So there's something really important about understanding and holding our past so that we can operate in our present and look after our future. My husband is a clinical academic, and he and I often compare, and rather than contrast. We're both incredibly curious. We both are rigorous in terms of the research that we do, and we both have to communicate that work in a way that goes beyond our own disciplinary boundaries. So that old CP Snow, two cultures, actually we don't see in our daily lives. The big difference that I have seen, and one of the reasons that more humanists don't become vice chancellors, for example, is that we have a mythology in the humanities that we operate on our own, that we're lone scholars. A very medieval notion of being a monastic, isolated nun monk in a cell praying on your own. And actually that isn't true, because we go to conferences, we collaborate, we network, but instead of giving footnotes to our collaborators, we have sort of star the first footnote and say, I'd like to thank a whole bunch of people that in a scientist's milieu would have been co-authors. So the big difference is psychological, if you like, seeing yourself as a lone scholar, a lone wolf, versus a scientist who, if you're going to be successful, has to learn really, really early on, like any clinician, to work both as part of a team and to lead a team. And that's built into the way science works in a way that it's not built in to the way that arts and humanities works.
It's interesting, isn't it? I suppose one of the questions it begs is the question of the educational role of the university. Of course, I studied medicine, as did Peter, your husband, and we knew what we were going into. But I fundamentally had defended the idea that actually part of the purpose of going to university is to be educated. And if that's about European history from 1848 to the fall to Bismarck or whatever, there's no problem with that.
And you'll use that knowledge in unusual ways, but above all, those skills of inquiry, those skills of communication, those skills of critical thinking, in a world where jobs are changing every year, not just every decade. Those are really, really valuable skills. We're not always great at helping students articulate the skills that they're developing, and we do owe it to the students who come to us, who take out considerable debt to ensure that they have a sense of what futures they are building towards. And we also have an obligation to taxpayers who are paying for some of that education to make sure that we also explain the benefits, not just to us as individuals, but more broadly as well. And that's why I go back to see that there's something really fundamental about arts and humanities and social sciences, about understanding the people side of the past, the present and the future, as well as the more technocratic side of the past, the present and the future. And of course, something like maths or astrophysics can be totally philosophical and fundamental to our understanding of how the universe works, without necessarily having any direct benefit apart from the sheer joy of seeing how small we are in the universe.
Yes. Do you find I mean, I always say that, you know, when I went to medical school, when you picked up the physiology textbook, right, that probably had most of the physiology there was in the whole world in the textbook. Now, of course, you can get 3 volumes on the physiology of the eye. So our students come from a very different place than the place you and I came to.
Absolutely.
And I wondered if that was the same in arts and humanities, you know.
Yeah. So we're teaching students to learn, and we're teaching students to be learners throughout their life, and we're teaching them the skills of learning. And in something like anatomy, and the anatomy of the human being hasn't changed. We just know it down to the submolecular level now. And it's impossible to memorize and take a multiple choice questionnaire on any of that. So you need to know either how to develop that level of expertise, that specialist expertise, and where to go to get it, or how to use simulation if you're going to maintain physical skills in order to be a doctor, or how to handle artifacts if you're going to be an archaeologist or a museum curator. So there's still plenty of learning to do. It's just you have to be 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years is no longer enough. We're all lifelong learners now, Eric.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, our son-in-law is a lecturer in political science in London, and he says that, for example, essay writing skills are not what he'd expected them to be. You know, the likes of you and I were trained rigorously in writing an essay. I bet you were. And it's a lot more freeform. So they're coming, you know, if you give them an essay in term 1, it could actually be very, very challenging for them, because
it's absolutely, mind you, they might be able to tune your TV in a way that I still don't understand how to do anymore.
Right. The other thing with just as preparation for history is my daughter, who you know a little bit,
Rachel.
Yes, Rachel used to complain that that it seemed as if history started at the First World War, and that they just repeatedly went over the First World War, and that, you know, the past, they don't go beyond and into the past in the way that they used to. Is that true, by the way? Or
so my experience for students, history starts the day they were born, and everything that you and I regard as contemporary is ancient. Really, really ancient. Eric, the wonderful thing about working in universities is that we have a chance to reinvent ourselves every year when a new group of undergraduates come in. That's what I absolutely love, is that sense of, you know, fresh excitement as our new undergraduates arrive. They don't know what is impossible. They have no sense of boundaries. They believe that although, you know, their predecessors who are hopeless, haven't been able to solve all the world's problems, they will achieve that. Do you know, that's you can't bottle that. That's such an exciting and amazing thing. So yes, their footnoting skills aren't what they used to be. And my big bugbear is nobody seems to know the difference between ITS and IT''S. But our students are brilliant. They're excited, they're energetic, and they genuinely want the planet to survive, people to survive in a more equitable way. And that helps me wake up every morning with a sense that it was all going to be all right. Now we're going to have to come to the end of the podcast soon, and because vice chancellors have got 11:30 meetings, but time for another couple of questions.
Yes, well, I was going to make a comment that the one thing I really disliked was 18-year-oldism. The 18-year-olds of today are not like the 18-year-olds when I was 18. And I asked your Prof of Classics, Bob Fowler, when was the first time somebody complained that the youth of today was not like the... And apparently it's Hector in the Iliad.
Exactly.
Complains that the young warriors don't fight. And the Iliad was written in 600 BC, according to Bob. So, this is a common complaint. And I'm just delighted with the excitement that you feel of that renewal. And that, what we get is undergraduates with different skills, and they can't just be clones of what we were in the late 70s when we were undergraduates. So, and more exciting stuff to come for you?
So lots more exciting stuff to come with the new campus that we're building down in Temple Quarter. Very different ways of thinking about how space works in bringing together the university and the city, but also, for example, putting seminar spaces next to labs, next to commercial companies which have spun out of our labs, so that you have a single environment which is very entrepreneurial. So you see not just taking an exam as the outcome of the work that you've done as a student, and not just producing a PhD thesis, but actually going out and creating a product, which you then actually create for communities or create on a commercial basis, and that all happening on the same floor. So that's a really exciting opportunity, not just for the University of Bristol, but for all universities. Getting out of that, universities were never really ivory towers, but getting away from that sense of being separate from business, being separate from actual practice, and bringing them together so the theory feeds into practice and practice feeds into theory. And that is an amazing opportunity for any Vice Chancellor.
Yes, absolutely. And you're quite right to generalize that. My old alma mater is Newcastle upon Tyne, where I did my medical degree. And in many respects, there are considerable similarities between the relationships of the universities in Newcastle with the city and the universities in Bristol with the city. Well, Evelyn, we've come to the end of our 35 minutes, and I was just wonderful to hear you talk about the students in the way that you did, and that sense of renewal that they bring. And so I wish you all the very best. I will be wandering over to Bristol to see a grandchild at some stage. So look forward to meeting with you. And we might be at the same O2 concert at some stage.
we will. We'll go and see Florence and the Machine. Yes. And so do come and visit. I think Bristol has built on the legacies of Vice Chancellors, your own time as Vice Chancellor, Hugh Brady's time as Vice Chancellor, and I've inherited the most special place, the most special group of people in an extraordinary city with remarkable buildings, collections, libraries, and it has been so well looked after. And my job is to, 10 years' time, hand it to my successor. Absolutely. In just the way that I've received it today, only better, bigger, and with all of the leaks in the roof fixed.
And with that comment, Evelyn, I think we can say cheerio to each other. And thank you so much for joining us.
Cheerio, Eric. See you very soon. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Thank you.
Visit studiosity.com/Students First for the next Students First Symposium, an open forum for faculty, staff and academics to candidly discuss and progress the issues that matter most in higher education.